Warning: the experiments performed in these lectures can be dangerous. Any attempt to perform these experiments on your own is undertaken at your own risk. Your lecturer is Professor Lonnie A. Gamble. Professor Gamble is a founding faculty member and co-director of the Sustainable Living Program at Maharishi University of Management in Fairfield, Iowa, where he has taught since 2003. He has a BS in Electrical Engineering from North Carolina State University. Professor Gamble is a co-founder and former board chair of the Sustainable Living Coalition and has founded half a dozen companies in the areas of renewable energy, telecommunications, sustainable building and development, and sustainable agriculture. He regularly writes, speaks, teaches, and develops curricula in these areas of interest and has received numerous teaching and service awards. In addition, Professor Gamble has a consulting practice in the design of high-performance buildings and renewable energy systems.
When thinking about sustainability in your life, what do you need to consider? The short answer is everything. Every dimension of your life can be reconsidered in terms of sustainability. This includes material dimensions of life like energy, food, water, housing, transportation, and city-rural context. Let me give you some examples. How might this affect your choices in purchasing a home in the sustainable future? Well, instead of buying your electricity from a utility company, you can produce your own electricity with solar panels on your roof. Instead of buying gasoline for your car, you can drive an electric car powered by energy you produce on your roof. Instead of heating your home with fossil fuels, your home can be designed to collect and store solar energy. Instead of buying all your food at the store, you can produce some of it in your backyard and buy the rest direct from local farmers. Instead of buying water from the water company, your house and yard can be designed to collect, store, and process rainwater. Instead of driving everywhere to get the necessities of daily life, you can live where everything you need is a short walk or bike ride away. But we aren't just material beings. We are social beings, needing to love and be loved. And we are spiritual beings, needing a sense of purpose and meaning. So there is a non-material aspect to sustainability. Two, actually. One which deals with social institutions like education, governance and economics, concepts like work, relationships, and a sense of purpose and meaning. And another non-material aspect that has to do with understanding our purpose in life. Without purpose and meaning, sustainability doesn't make sense. If there's no purpose or the purpose isn't good, sustainability makes no logical sense. Every aspect of human endeavor needs to be reconsidered in terms of sustainability, and it's bigger than anything else that humans have ever done. It's bigger than the communications revolution, the industrial revolution, and probably as big a revolution as going from hunter-gatherers to settled agriculture. We are in the beginning stages of a 50 to 100-year transition, and at the end of that time, we'll wake up with a different relationship to each other and to nature, a new set of eyes to look at the world, a new conception of how the world works and our place in it, a new worldview. Like the agricultural and industrial revolutions that preceded it, everyone on Earth will be involved in the sustainability transition. Today, sustainable ways exist side by side with non-sustainable ways. Think of buildings. Over the past few years, there has been a convergence towards sustainable building. In 2014, it's pretty hard to find an architecture program that isn't rooted in the principles of sustainable design. Today, buildings use 50% of the energy that flows through the economy, and the American Institute of Architects has a plan to bring that to zero. The American Institute of Architects Architecture 2030 plan requires that all new buildings be designed to produce as much or more energy than they use by 2030. The Architecture 2030 plan is not just a dream. It's the official policy of the American Institute of Architects. Design is the first signal of human intention. If we get the initial design right, then we often get cascading side benefits, what Wendell Berry calls solving for pattern. If we get the initial design wrong, then we are left to deal with cascading side effects. Let's look at city design as an example. If we design a city so that the necessities of life, school, work, shopping, social life, and entertainment are just a short walk or bike ride away, then we get the side benefits of regular exercise, social connection, less use of fossil fuels for driving, and less cost and less space for car infrastructure like parking and roads. If we design a city so that the necessities of life require driving, we get side effects like extensive car infrastructure, more car accidents, time wasted driving, expense and pollution from automobiles, and social isolation. Let's take a look at building design. If we design a building that is well insulated, is oriented properly to the sun, and has windows placed to capture solar energy in the winter and daylight all year long, the building will provide a lot of its own heating and lighting. If we don't design these features in, they are difficult and expensive to retrofit later, and we will be stuck with a series of those cascading side effects I was just talking about, including high energy bills to operate the building and lower comfort levels. In the future, there won't be separate sustainable options. It'll just be the way we live and do business. It's what I've dedicated my professional and personal life to. I live rooted in the abundant flows of natural systems. What does that mean? Well, I live in a home I built myself from straw bales. My home is powered by solar and wind. I haven't paid an electric bill in 22 years. It doesn't seem like a big deal to me, but I got a standing ovation once for saying that to an audience, so I mention it in lectures now. I harvest rainwater for water supply. I haven't paid a water bill in 22 years either. You could do this, really, it's not so hard. I grow some of the food I eat every day just outside my kitchen door. I even grow food in the winter in simple structures I will show you how to build and use. And I live in Iowa. I took everything I learned at home and I scaled it to the size of a neighborhood, largely because friends were coming to me and wanting to do something similar. A project called Abundance Eco-Village. We'll visit it and I'll talk more about it. The point is, again, it's not that big of a deal. As Bill Mollison, the developer of the permaculture sustainable design methodology said, though the problems of the world are increasingly complex, the solutions remain embarrassingly simple. I think it's true. My colleagues and I at Maharishi University of Management created a new academic discipline, sustainable living, which is a transdisciplinary, hands-on, solutions-based approach to the broad range of challenges and opportunities that face humanity, like managing global warming, addressing economic instability and inequity, and protecting against ecological collapse. My goal is to show you how we can begin to favor the principles of sustainability in your life, to become a participant in the sustainability revolution, in as big or as small a way as you can. We'll explore growing food at home, using solar energy, harvesting rainwater, and even rethinking investments. Rather than being passive consumers, we can become co-producers of food, energy, building materials, and more. In the past 50 years, the supply chains that provide us with our material needs have become global in scope. We've gone from getting our food, shelter, and energy from within our local communities to sourcing our needs from a global marketplace. This made sense when energy was cheap and global warming wasn't a concern. But we've got a whole new set of technologies that provide us with local solutions, like harvesting solar energy from our rooftops, and new approaches to urban agriculture and organic agriculture that allow us to grow food in and around urban areas. Part of sustainability is going back to getting energy, food, and building materials sourced locally and sustainably. We'll explore ways to relocalize in your home and community, like growing food in your backyard or on your porch, developing relationships with local farmers, planting fruit trees in public parks, generating your electricity from solar energy, harvesting rainwater, and building a home from local natural materials. We do all of this in my community. If we get more of our needs met locally, the good and bad consequences of how we provision our lives become visible. We become directly aware of the consequences of our actions. We create interest in economic activity in our communities. The places formerly used to get the stuff we need can be restored to wetlands, wildlands, and beauty, providing essential services for all life on Earth. Cultivating them as wetlands, wildlands, and protecting their beauty becomes our role, not exploiting them to satisfy unsustainable needs and wants. To talk about the practical details of sustainable living, we need to start by discussing the concept of sustainability, the design of sustainability. The classic definition of sustainability, and the one I'll work with more or less throughout the course, is meeting the needs of the current generation without diminishing the ability of future generations to meet their needs. This definition comes from a report called Our Common Future, also known as the Brundtland Report, which was commissioned by the United Nations in 1987. So sustainability means that we need to consider the impact of our current use of natural resources, materials, and energy on future generations. For example, we can make electricity from fossil fuels, or we can make electricity from solar energy. In the case of fossil fuels, it's a store of energy that we're using up, and what we use means less for future generations. In the case of solar energy, it's a flow of energy that is replenished daily. Learning to use it now leaves future generations better able to meet their needs for energy. Sustainability involves dedicating significant resources to the regeneration and renewal of the human and natural systems that we and our children and their children depend on. To understand this better, we can think about the link between energy, entropy, and sustainability. Sustainability really is all about understanding energy. Everything of use to us requires energy. Houses, clothes, and cars require energy to make and energy to use. All material things are concentrated energy. That's what Einstein said with his discovery of E equals mc squared. Even human usefulness, our thinking, our working, our creative minds is all about energy. Even our social relationships with one another, even our spiritual relationships all require and use up energy. We have to have biological energy to fuel the body and the mind and the spirit. In addition, we need energy to make humans productive. We're born as helpless little babies, and we need to be nurtured, cultured, and educated. All this takes energy. The first law of thermodynamics says that energy is neither created nor destroyed, so you might think that we can just use it over and over again. But the second law of thermodynamics says that every time we use energy, some of its usefulness is lost. Whenever we use energy, it always changes form. And it always changes form in a particular direction, from a more concentrated, organized form to a more dissipated, disorganized form. Here's an example. Explode gasoline in the cylinder of a car, and it's the tendency of energy to disperse that drives the piston and drives the car down the road. It's that dispersion that fuels our bodies from food. You could use the energy over again. You didn't destroy it, but it's less concentrated, less organized, and therefore less useful. So no matter how efficient we get in recycling and conserving, we are inevitably moving toward entropy. We're depleting usefulness. We're using up the ability of the planet to support life. Once we deplete the usefulness of nature and society, there is no place else to get more. So it seems that we may have to do three things. First, slow down our use of resources. Second, explore alternative sources of energy. And third, learn to create human systems that regenerate and renew. Systems that work within the great ecology of nature, like the hydrological cycle, the systems that recycle materials, and the systems that maintain the fertility of the soil. The great news is, of course, that we have a big, beautiful source of energy that offsets the inevitable loss of usefulness to entropy. What is it? Solar energy. We have solar energy to regenerate and renew. We have solar energy for sustainability. That's our alternative energy source. Now, what about slowing down our use of resources? How does that work? Unfortunately, many people think it's all about cutting out and cutting back and self-denial. Sustainability is not about doing without. It's about learning to work within the abundant flows of natural systems. Now, what does that mean? Sustainability is about efficiency and substitution. We need to be more efficient at the way we're using energy and materials. We need to substitute toxic ways of doing things for non-toxic ways that work with nature rather than against. But efficiency and substitution are not enough. We need to create systems that, like nature, use solar energy to regenerate and renew the lost usefulness caused by entropy. Then we can begin to create systems that work with and celebrate nature's abundance today, creating the possibility for future generations to do the same. The definition, you remember, that we've been working with. Much current discussion about sustainability under the heading of efficiency and substitution is about making the human ecological footprint smaller. The ecological footprint is one measure of ecological impact. Ecological footprint is a calculation of the amount of land needed to source the material for your life and to sink your wastes, year in and year out. The average American has a 24-acre ecological footprint, but the US only has 9.6 acres available per person. So we run a deficit of 14.4 acres per person. That's about 14 football fields of deficit. 14 football fields more than we really have to get what we need and dispose of our waste. Our ecological footprint currently in 2014 is out of sight and out of our control. It also reaches all over the globe. This is what unsustainable looks like. We make up this ecological footprint deficit by harvesting resources faster than they regenerate, dumping carbon into the atmosphere instead of sequestering it, and using the productive capability of other, usually poorer countries, often in the global south. If everyone used resources the way the US does, we would need 4 Earths, and we've only got 1. Looking at the whole planet, there are 4.7 acres available for each person on Earth. This is called the fair share ecological footprint. According to Dr. William Rees, who developed the ecological footprint methodology, we've been in ecological overshoot since around 1970. Overshoot means that the annual demand on resources exceeds what Earth can regenerate. We're using up the Earth's resources at a greater rate than they can regenerate. One of the biggest challenges to maintaining a small ecological footprint, some might say the biggest, is the mindset that fossil fuels are a renewable resource. So when we gauge tolerable distances, we think in terms of driving a car or flying a plane. Sure, we'll buy our avocados from Peru, bring in our mangoes from Chile, we'll drive across town to see a movie or 2 towns away for a night out. But what if when we're thinking about buying a house, we asked how far it is to walk or bike to the closest grocery store or place of worship instead of how far it is to drive? Whether the soil in the backyard was suitable for a family vegetable garden instead of just lawn? Where the rainwater cistern was located, assuming there is one. Here's where localization is important for sustainability. If we can get our human needs met locally and sustainably, we will leave more of the planet for natural systems and the other life forms we share the planet with. If you'd like to calculate your ecological footprint, there are online sites to help you do that. It is important that we live within the biophysical limits of the planet. We only have so much incoming sunlight, and we need to share it and the other physical resources of the planet with other species that live here. It starts with trying to live within the biophysical limits of our homes and neighborhoods, within a fair share ecological footprint. Taken to its logical consequences, of course, this idea of ecological footprints takes us to the conclusion that the Earth would be better off if we were all dead. But fortunately, human footprints can have a positive impact. To be sustainable, our reduced footprint not only needs to be small, it also needs to be regenerative. What if the byproducts of human activity were regenerative? Examples of regenerative byproducts include wetlands, wildlands, and beauty. Our reduced footprint needs to be beautiful because it's easier to care for and love things we consider beautiful. E.O. Wilson states that the mass of ants on the planet is more than the mass of humans. Yet we don't look down from an airplane at ant colonies and bemoan the negative global effects of ant society on the future viability of the Earth. Because ants work with nature, their homes are built of ecological materials, and they don't use fossil fuels. Their footprint is regenerative. Ours can be too. Sustainability is about how we celebrate nature's abundance and diversity to create a life that is regenerative in a physical sense, using solar energy, but also regenerates and renews the human spirit, which is subject to its own laws of entropy and regularly in need of regeneration and renewal. The best place to start thinking about sustainability is right at your front door. Whether you live on an acreage in the country or in an apartment in the city, you can begin to make the shift to sustainable living. Sustainable living is a process, not an end goal. Our understanding of sustainability continues to evolve, and with it, our lifestyle. There are surprising advantages to sustainable living in the city. I mentioned my home in the country earlier, powered by solar panels, water supplied by harvesting rainwater, food production integrated into the landscape, and it's made of local natural materials. Sounds pretty good, huh? But contrast this with my friend Ben Stallings, who lives in an apartment in the city while I live in a rural environment just 3 miles from town. Ben has never owned a car. He's always managed to live in a place where he could walk or bike to get all his physical and social needs met. He found my community as part of a 3,000-mile bike tour around the U.S., visiting eco-villages, intentional communities, and other places on the forefront of sustainable living. He takes the train instead of flying. He lives in an apartment building, and he shops at the farmer's market just down the street from his apartment. His energy bill is about 1/3 the Iowa average, partly because he shares apartment walls with others. Even though he doesn't grow his own food or have solar panels, his ecological and carbon footprint are less than mine. In my rural location, I have to drive to get all my needs met. Even though I generate my own electricity, I am dependent on a worldwide network of suppliers to build and repair the equipment I use to generate my own power. Some argue that New York City is the greenest place in the U.S. People live in compact apartments, the shared walls resulting in fewer materials to build and less energy to run. Most people can get their needs met by walking, biking, or public transport and don't have a car. The proper urban context multiplies the benefits of green technologies. The cutting edge of sustainability is making dense urban and village environments the most attractive places to live. Sustainable living is often thought in terms of boundaries or limits, and for many people, limits are bad. But the infinity of life is lived within the boundaries of a body and the laws of physics on the earth. In design, boundaries are the drivers of creative solutions, of richness and diversity. The toughest design problems are those that have no design constraints. Gravity can be seen as a boundary, or celebrated as the force that holds people to the surface of this beautiful planet and sets the Earth in just the right orbit around the sun. In contrast to the limited stocks of fossil energy, nature's flows are abundant. Here's an example from my life. I use solar energy to heat my water, and I get my water supply from the sky by harvesting rainwater. If I know it's going to rain again soon, and it's a sunny day, I can take a shower all day long. The water will be replenished by rain, and the sun comes up every morning. If we live within the generous bounds of nature's laws, we've got plenty. This bread is stored solar energy in the form of biological energy. When I eat it, it provides energy that drives the biological processes in my body. The biological energy in the bread is used in many different ways: thinking, moving, doing physical work, before it eventually is turned into body heat and waste. I could use the bread flour in a different way. In this case, I dispersed the flour into the air and lit it with a flame, causing the explosion you just saw. I blew up the flour without getting anything of use to me out of the stored solar energy in the flour. Rather than blowing up the wheat or eating it, we could plant the wheat. The wheat plant diverts energy from growing stalks and leaves into producing grains, into giving back for future generations. Like the wheat plant, humans need to dedicate energy to renewal for future generations. But we don't have to plant all the wheat. We can use some for bread to meet the needs of the current generation, and we can use some to plant for future generations. One seed can yield 75 seeds in just a few months' growing time, using solar energy, the fertility of the land, and water as inputs. Nature is fecund and abundant. We've got plenty for ourselves and for future generations if we use resources and energy wisely rather than blowing them up. Here's a diagram that illustrates the abundant flows of solar energy that powers nature's economy. Imagine a box big enough to hold all the solar energy the Earth receives in a year. The smaller box represents the quantity of solar energy that drives the hydrological cycle. Wind energy is also solar energy, and this box represents the amount of solar energy that drives the winds. The small box here represents the amount of solar energy that plants use. Through photosynthesis, plants use solar energy to create biological order and structure on the planet. And biology works in concert with geophysical processes to continually recreate and maintain optimum conditions for life. In that sense, the order and structure of this piece by Vivaldi was forged in the thermonuclear reactions in the center of the sun. The changes we need to make in our lives for sustainable living lead to a different way of life, a different way of thinking about the world and our place in it. But that doesn't imply a diminished quality of life. In the wealthy countries, we've gone past the point where increases in material wealth bring corresponding increases in human well-being. Increases in well-being in the industrialized countries come from the developments in the other dimensions of sustainability, like better relationships and a sense of purpose and meaning. The academic literature on happiness indicates that the correlation between happiness and income begins to break down somewhere around $10,000 to $15,000 per capita annual income. As a thought experiment, consider this. In the US, we've doubled productivity since 1970. But what have we done with that increased productivity? Well, mostly we bought more stuff. Another way of thinking of this is that we could have a 1970 material lifestyle and work only 20 hours a week, leaving more time for family, friends, reflection, and volunteer work in our communities. If we stay on the same economic track, in another 50 years, we'll double productivity again, leading to twice as much cheap stuff. Will your life be better with twice as much cheap stuff? Or could it be better if we took more and better advantage of this increasing productive capability by spending more time cultivating new skills, eating better, fresher food, making more friends, building closer ties to our family and neighbors? I'll leave that to you. Sustainable living is applicable across a wide range of scales. So far, we've been talking about individual efforts at sustainability, but there are some things that need to be done at the level of the community and beyond. I have the good fortune to live in a community that has a wide range of sustainability efforts going on. Community leadership plays an essential role in integrating sustainability into a community. The Great Courses team and I met with Fairfield, Iowa's Mayor Ed Malloy, who is dedicated to sustainability in his role as a mayor and also in his personal life.
My name is Ed Malloy. I'm the mayor of Fairfield, Iowa, and we're standing in front of my 10.5 kilowatt, 42 panel solar array that provides approximately 65 to 70% of the electricity during a full year for my personal home. And this was installed a year ago, something that I had been very passionate about for many years, but was able to get it to a point where the economics of installing this made quite a lot of sense because the cost of materials had come down significantly, and also in partnership with our utility, Alliant Energy, there were some very nice incentives offered, rebates towards these panels, and also some incentives from the federal government and state, which made it very easy to make the decision to do something that I've wanted to do for some time. What's very important to me is to always move in the direction of living closer to nature and natural law. And the energy that the sun provides is free. It essentially is what gives life to our entire planet and to the entire solar system. So this small piece of connecting the sun to our home is something that is very gratifying, and also just in a very quiet, peaceful way makes me feel good about that greater connection to nature and to natural law. We live in an extraordinary community where when something like this becomes evident to our citizens that there is some greater value and that there's some greater enhancement in living closer to nature, we take full advantage of these opportunities. Over the last 2.5 years, we've seen our community develop well over 300 kilowatts of solar power in both the commercial and residential sector. And we see ourselves as a model, as a place where we can demonstrate for small communities all over America how easy it is and how sufficient and efficient this transition can be to a more renewable energy future. So we're very, very happy about what we've been able to do for our home. We encourage this all across our community and really invite anyone who would like to come and see how we've incorporated it into our community of Fairfield, Iowa, to come and see if that could be modeled elsewhere in America.
As I quoted to you earlier, though the problems of the world are increasingly complex, the the solutions remain embarrassingly simple. Our goal here is to leave the increasingly complex problems for others to explore and focus on the solutions.